I've outlasted, well, 3 conductors. I'm on my 4th conductor here. I don't think I'm going to outlast Ben. He's too young. I'm too old.
I'm Donald Loach, and I came here to teach in the music departments in 1964, but at the time that I came, there was no orchestra. It wasn't until the early 1970s when Milos Velimirovich joined the faculty, and when he did, he brought Douglas Hargrave from Yale to try to develop an orchestra and make it a showcase. And it was really quite a remarkable undertaking. And it became the orchestra that really was the foundation of what exists today.
That experience allowed me to take this position and look at what the opportunities would be, which were astounding. There are not many universities where I could have done what I did.
Doug had a teaching position at the university, but he was determined to put together an orchestra and to make it a high caliber orchestra with professional level people in it.
I hired Wally Bardenwerper, the former editor of Cavalier Daily, to do publicity for me and paid for it out of my own pocket because I knew how important that was. We put things together, we rehearsed it over a whole semester. I didn't have a fall concert. I needed every rehearsal, and I said, okay, so what's the best vision forward to take the community, take the university, put them together, and build the best thing that was possible? The question is how to pull the community in. Biggest opportunity, I had a budget of $1,500 or something that, and I had the possibility of charging for tickets. So that was pretty valuable. I could double or triple my small budget by just charging for concerts. That was the first priority. I was still very much involved with teaching and conducting and everything else. I wasn't doing 8-hour days. And thank God I had a wife who put up with with the long hours. In order to develop an audience, I knew that the soloist had to be better than the orchestra, which means I had to spend some of the money that was coming in on ticket sales for the soloists. As we gathered support, 4 years I had enough money, $33,000. So I hired Margot Singleton. In terms of building the orchestra up itself, I think in the 4th year when we performed the Petrushka, Stravinsky, that was a high water mark at that point. That, when I came, would not have been possible.
I guess that's what I've witnessed, the triumph of the university supporting, but it really being a symphony that belongs to Charlottesville. It's a community orchestra, and that was, I think, the goal from the outset. And that goal was set by Doug Hargrave, and I should have to mention Elizabeth Gatewood in the same breath, because the two of them made it happen.
It would have been, I believe, 1984 that I agreed to take the general manager job at the university for the symphony. The symphony at that point had 2 professional chairs, violin and cello. They were part of a trio that Doug Hargrave actually was the one who initiated bringing in that trio and figured out how to do it. It was complicated because there actually was not a position available at that point. He essentially had to make one.
He got a faculty line, basically 1 year's salary, and managed to convince a trio, an active trio of very fine musicians, the Monticello Trio. He convinced them to come in and play in the principal positions of the orchestra. This is before my time even, and they did. And it was that was the first arrangement of where we had faculty in the principal positions of the orchestra, playing in the orchestra. And that worked for a while, and then he wanted to expand that idea. And Elizabeth managed to get funding and basically put together a symphony board of community members and also alumni who were very generous, and then started endowing positions. And that's how I finally came to my position.
Doug was the gentlest man of not too many words, but when he said yes or no, he meant it. And I learned to trust him and admire so much what he had already done in the way of gathering this group together. He had a wonderful way with subscribers, and Doug brought so much to the symphony. He established, first of all, a management. Secondly, he established the first capital campaign, giving us a financial cushion. He brought in his love for young people and his immense interest in involving the young people in symphonic music, and continued with this as he brought in 2 youth concerts a year, and next established a wonderful relationship with the school children and formed the youth orchestra here. So that was one of his big contributions.
There was plenty of room for the local players, whether they were students or whether they were actually members of the community. They could function as members of the orchestra happily, and Doug Hargrave had an awful lot to do with that.
Doug was continuing to blend the professionals with the local people. I mean, there were people like, of course, Nancy Garlick and Pete Spar, who were already active soloists, and so he depended a lot on using those local people.
They brought in Otto Werner Mueller. Mueller came back, I think at least 3 or 4 times while Doug was there. I remember he brought in students from Curtis. I know we had Nicholas Kitchen, for example. We had Pamela Frank. There was further room to grow. Doug had pushed it to the point where it was a really outstanding orchestra. What we didn't have were the professionals that we have now.
And look at what he did. Look at the people he brought here. I mean, it was just absolutely fantastic. And I think in a lot of ways, unless you really knew symphonic music, you didn't appreciate as much of what Doug did until after Doug left.
Doug was wonderful to work with, so easy to work with, organized, made things happen, and I was devastated when he left. I thought, I'm not sure I can handle this.
He was at NIU for 11 years, but I think he missed being on the East Coast.
Richard Baritow, our principal violist, knew Carl from the University of Illinois, I believe Carl came from. He was not happy there, and I think Richard knew it, and I think Carl was looking for something closer to home, too. And it was closer to Eastern Music Festival, where he was still involved. When he first came, he did that every summer.
And he applied for the job here. I was there when he did his audition. It was quite amazing. And he got the job. And so he's very happy to come here and be the new conductor here.
I thought Doug was really, really good. I thought Carl just moved the notch up just to another level.
What Doug Hargrave started, I think Carl built on in his own quiet way. He was an extraordinary musician. I think the love of music happened with every single concert. What you have to understand is how proud I was to be part of this, because it was some of the best music that I ever made. I played an awful lot of good concerts with professional musicians for 50 years, and some of these concerts were actually some of the best.
It's hard to compare Carl Roskott to anybody. He was unique. He was a guy, you loved the way he did it or you hated it, and I loved it, and certainly the professionals in the orchestra did too. He just had this understated way of doing it, very efficient of motion, and he could make a very small, subtle gesture, and it carried more weight than other conductors, flailing about. Plus, he was not afraid to program anything in that hall. But I think we did 3 different Mahler symphonies. We haven't done any since.
I can't think of any musician who impressed me more in my whole career than Carl Roskott. Incredible what he did with an orchestra, not just the technique, but the vision. Every concert we gave here was an enormous success without exception. It made the audience happy, it made the students happy, they learned a lot in the process. He's the greatest musician I've ever known, and you heard it in the concerts, all of them.
Another aspect of Carl's tenure was that he was so supportive of our professionals that were already here. He continued to use those people as soloists, and it was under him that the first chair was established by Betty and John Scott, and that brought in Sven Ronning as the concertmaster. Having that first chair established launched the ultimate establishment of other chairs, so that was a very important event.
Carl had an unusual ability to connect. Somehow his understanding of the music, he knows how to project that onto the musicians and get it back from them. Carl could just get a sound out of the orchestra that I just thought it was amazing, the sound he could get. I don't think I ever missed a rehearsal. I just wanted to sit through all the rehearsals and hear it. One of my favorites, believe it or not, was the Nutcracker. You know, you go to the Nutcracker and you go for the ballet, and you don't really think that much about the music. And when you do a concert production, like Carl did, oh my gosh, incredible music that I had never really fully appreciated before. And Carl obviously was his kind of music.
Hi there, I'm Kate Tamarkin, and this is Jillian, and she wants me to tell you a little bit about my life before she was born, and that is my conducting life. So I auditioned for the Charlottesville Symphony in one day. There was a rehearsal up with the Catholic University of America Orchestra, and that ended at 10 at night, and Cliff drove me down, and we landed at the Red Roof Inn around 1 in the morning, got in and got up later, and at 8 a.m. I met Bruce Holsinger at the Bodo's Bagels, and off we went for a day of interviews, meeting board members, meeting the principals, looking around the department, looking around the university, and doing part of an orchestra rehearsal that night. And then a lovely reception afterwards that ended at 10:30. And then we drove back to Washington. I remember loving the energy of the orchestra. And I was very intrigued by the model of the orchestra, which was, we have professionals in the principal positions, we have community members, and we have talented students. And it seemed to me that there was an enormous amount of potential, which was the first time I had come across that model. When I got here, I found a lot of pieces, just a lot of pieces. Not that there wasn't energy, but there wasn't cohesion. I think they were waiting for somebody to bake the cake.
I just like the energy she brought. It's sort of what we needed. And I loved her programming too. She was a little more realistic than Carl about not just the size of the pieces, but what the orchestra was capable of doing.
Kate brought a lot of elegance to the stage. In her long conducting outfit, she was quite a sight to see.
I would say that when Kate began to be our conductor, there was a difference, and it was palpable. She was elegant. Even her hand motions were elegant, and we all got used to that, and her choices of music went along with who she was as a conductor.
She gets on with so many people and had such a gift of engaging with the audience. Brought some much needed joy, and her giving heart was evident in her conducting. She really wanted people to enjoy the subscribers, the general audience who was there, and the symphony orchestra. So there was a constant feeling of upliftedness about her conducting and about the effect it had on people.
I met Kate and I was charmed immediately. I got the sense from Kate that she was willing to do a lot of outreach with the community, with donors, with trying to market the symphony in a new way, think about themes and music to bring to the symphony orchestra for playing. And one of her ideas was having a gala around the idea of the painted violins.
I ended up being chair of the painted violins. This was during John Rosenblum's very successful $3 million campaign.
In 2005, there was this movement to increase the endowment. So important. The doors were revolving in terms of our principal players.
The painted violins were what I call the face of that effort. And so it went on a year, and it was actually Kate Tamarkin's idea. She suggested it, and we took off and had a wonderful response from local artists, of course. It turned out to be a beautiful collection of violins. And of course, John Rosenblum, as was typical of John, he met his $3 million goal.
And I think the results of that are clear in terms of the kind of orchestra we have today. Our orchestra is stable. Our principals are stable. They're able to build a career, with what we can offer. They're teaching at the university, their own private studios, and they stay. They like Charlottesville. They want to raise their families here, and so that endowment, and of course the endowment has continued to grow, and I think it shows in the quality of our product and our music. She was key in the endowment campaign. Many of the calls that John made or I made or other members of the cabinet made, often Kate would go. And those were, I think they were the most successful calls we made. She had all the dimensions that you want for an organization that is poised to grow.
When I retired, there was this amazing, beautiful celebration and whole evening at Darden. And it was, outside of my wedding, it was the most amazing experience I believe I've ever had, where I was at the center of all that thanks and love and gratitude. I was really overcome by it.
She was just a great emissary for the symphony. As a public figure, we needed people to be able to put a personality on it in a more vivid way.
I always felt that being a music director was like being the musical mayor of a town. What we do matters, what we say, what we are matters. And I always tried to have that integrity.
From a surprisingly early age, I had wanted in the back of my mind to be a conductor. But there was one really pivotal moment for me, and that was after I conducted my first full classical program. And that was with Harvard Bach Society Orchestra, my senior year of college. Immediately after that program, I went backstage to the room I was using as a dressing room, and I was going to go and say hi to everyone who had come. But something told me, just wait 1 second and be in this room alone. And I waited just a second, and I had this moment of epiphany that was almost like a voice speaking inside my head. It didn't say words, but the thought was very clear, which came to me, which was, you are going to do this for the rest of your life. And that's what really got me started on this path. The initial connection with Charlottesville was by chance. My predecessor, Kate Tamarkin, had to withdraw from a concert. And on a very tight timeline, Charlottesville Symphony had to find a replacement. I owe my initial connection to Charlottesville to Aaron Hill, who said, well, we could ask this guy Ben Rous down. But that was the first time that I conducted Charlottesville Symphony. And I have very, very fond memories of that program. It was great fun to come here and to encounter this orchestra that I knew about from colleagues like Aaron Hill and others. But I had never been to this town, I had never heard this orchestra, I had never played in these halls. And it was, I remember it as just a great time. And it was a few years later that I saw Charlottesville Symphony was searching for a music director. And I was thrilled to get considered, and the trial week was wonderful, and I was really impressed with the department and the symphony board and their investment in this process. And I knew I wanted to work here, and when the offer came, it was a no-brainer that I was going to move to Charlottesville with my family.
His first performance, and he did the Seventh Symphony of Beethoven, and I just thought it was brilliant. And I thought, gee, we've really got somebody. And then his interest in contemporary music and his willingness to perform some wild stuff and do what he's doing, I think is remarkable. I'm very happy with this director.
I think Ben Rous approached the podium in a very different way. He had a lot of energy. He had youth. He had his background in dance. He was an entirely different personality, an entirely different kind of conductor.
Ben brought quite a different style. He has been this terrific jolt of energy, and I love the fact that he exposes us to new work, some being written right now, are just a major part of our music education.
And Ben's style was different. He was showing us how contemporary classical music could also be challenged for the musicians as well as for the audience and their ear. He was trying to educate us in some of the new ways that composers were thinking about music.
I think we expected that he was going to go for some contemporary composers, some people he knew. That was exciting to think about what he might bring to the podium. He likes new music. He wants to support new music and living composers. I've just thoroughly enjoyed many of the composers that he has introduced us to.
When I came into this orchestra, I saw an orchestra that served both a university and a city. I saw a community of people who were curious. I decided from the beginning to trust the Charlottesville Symphony's audience to be curious along with me. I thought that if I showed right from the beginning that the audience would come along with us. An anniversary season is a time that you think back as well as thinking ahead. And it's made me really grateful for the community that I've walked into. How interested, how really committed and loyal our audience has been. It's made me think about the community of musicians, the community of students, but mainly the symphony's family of music lovers that share these experiences. I've just been really, really grateful for their kindness and their interest and their commitment to the same things that I'm committed to.
I've been in a wonderful position watching the legacy of Kate Tamarkin as music director, and then actually was involved with the search committee that brought our new director, Ben Rous, in. And Ben has really built on Kate's legacy and has done just extraordinary work the last several years. If you've ever watched Ben conduct, he's electric, he's dynamic, and he's an extraordinary communicator with the audience. So whenever you have an orchestra event with Ben at the helm, it's just really quite a delight. He's been very innovative in terms of the programming, which is so vital because we need to build and establish a new audience. And I'm a firm believer that the tried and true audience also wants to be pushed a little bit too, and brought along as part of that process and that experiment. And I think Ben is absolutely the right person to have done that. So the symphony has a 50-year legacy of being one of the gems here of the university and the Charlottesville community in the arts. And I think as we approach a new era, maybe 50 more years, 5 years from now, being in a new home, the Center for the Arts is going to be an extraordinary opportunity to build upon that legacy. and think of the ways that the symphony will be able to innovate as well. So there's so many opportunities to do some extraordinary work, and I think that the future of the symphony is really bright.